Hello guys, so as you have probably heard already, HYBE has launched its subsidiary in Beijing, China, back in April. There was news about it last week, and I wanted to cover it as quickly as possible, but I wanted to prepare something more comprehensively because, as you know, or you might not know, China is a very compelling and complicated country. And when it comes to diplomacy, China has been the country that Korea has really been, careful about in its relationship. So we're gonna talk about risks and opportunities associated with HYBE's expansion into China. All right, and this video is divided into 5 parts. First, the news itself, how HYBE's position in terms of its relation with China, and the lifting of Hallyu ban, the Korean wave ban in China. Part 3 is about opportunities, and part 4 is about risks, and last but not least, part 5, Korean government. So here we go. All right, so first of all, let me briefly read this article for you from May 29th. HYBE has officially launched a local subsidiary in China, signaling a more active push into the Chinese market for its artists. HYBE announced on May 29th that it established HYBE China Corporation Ltd. In Beijing on April 2nd. This marks HYBE's 4th overseas corporation, following the launch of HYBE Japan, America, and Latin. A HYBE representative said, "We began preparations last year and have now established HYBE China," and added, "The new branch will focus on supporting HYBE music group artists and their activities within the Chinese market." So notice how they have mentioned the exact timing that they prepare for the this launch of the office since last year, when the Hallyu ban started to ease noticeably, interestingly. Now, other major Korean entertainment companies like SM, YG, and JYP have already been operating local subsidiaries in China. SM launched WAVE, and JYP created a Chinese idol group called Boy Story as part of their localized strategies. Industry watchers believe that HYBE's move is likely tied to recent expectations that the long-standing Hallyu ban, which is restrictions on Korean pop culture in China, is starting to ease. So, with the article says, with BTS, 17, and other highly valuable IP under its wing, HYBE's establishment of a Chinese branch is seen as a strategic response to that shifting landscape. But for now, HYBE China reportedly has no plans to produce separate edition programs or debut a new local group in China. Compared to HYBE Japan's N-Team or HYBE America's Cat's Eye, both of which launched locally tailored groups, HYBE China's role appears more limited at this stage. So that's pretty interesting, right? And as we're gonna read, actually, let me read this part first. Oh, but before that, HYBE Japan has recently debuted a new group called AOEM, right? AOEM. They dropped a new music video, so go check it out if you're interested. One of HYBE's labels, Playlist Entertainment, had already set up a Chinese subsidiary called Playlist China back in 2018 before being acquired by HYBE. A HYBE official added, Playlist China will continue to focus on supporting playlist artists and their local activities, just as it has been. So, currently, Playlist is the only label on their HYBE with groups with Chinese members. So 17 has 2 members, June and D8 from China, and To Us, who debuted last year, has a Chinese member named Hanjin. And fortunately, compared to other companies like SM, there were no issues or controversies around the Chinese members. So that's a good thing. But other than Playlist Entertainment, HYBE has not debuted groups with Chinese members. Now, this wasn't the first time that HYBE had something to do with China. Back in 2023, there was a news that HYBE partnered with Tencent Music in terms of music streaming and distribution. Now, this article says, according to HYBE, on May 24th, the company recently signed a distribution agreement with Tencent Music for music streaming and digital content. HYBE emphasized that it has already been distributing music from its artists in China, and that this latest agreement merely formalizes their existing partnership, cautioning against overinterpretation of its significance. But until now, HYBE's releases in China have often been delayed compared to global release dates. With this formal agreement now in place, music releases in China are expected to align with international schedules going forward. Now, at the time, the article said, within the art industry and entertainment industry, this partnership is being seen as a sign that HYBE is making a more serious move into China. This is especially important because HYBE's overseas revenue has been heavily concentrated in North America and Japan, and the company has long faced pressure to diversify. Last year, so that means 2022, HYBE generated 1.18 trillion Korean won in overseas sales, of which 89.5% came from North America and Japan. China made up just 1%. Now, from HYBE's perspective, the article said, China is not a market that can be ignored simply because it currently accounts for just 1% of sales. China, along with the US and Japan, is considered one of the big three overseas markets for K-pop. According to Korea Customs Service trade statistics, K-pop album exports to China between January and April of this year totaled 18.98 million USD, which is a 195.7% increase compared to the same period year before. 17, one of HYBE's artists, broke records in April with their 10th mini album selling over 3.99 million copies and recorded 4.55 million in its first week sales. This historic achievement is largely credited to Chinese fans who reportedly purchased over 2 million copies of the album through group orders. Now, HYBE chairman Bang Xiyoung has voiced concerns about a broader Korean K-pop slowdown, but remained optimistic about China's growth potential. He has said, despite the Hallyu ban, K-pop consumption in China is growing thanks to consumer-driven alternative channels and increasing per capita spending. And then the article said that there's a speculation that HYBE may include a Chinese member in its next idol group. And as it turns out, Hanjin from China is included in TOUS. And it said that until for a long time, HYBE actually, what does it say? Yeah, this is on other than Pledis, N-Team has one Taiwanese member, with the rest of HYBE's idols are from Korea, Japan, the US, Vietnam, or Australia. Boy Next Door, who debuted in May of 2003, consists entirely of Korean members, right? This is in contrast to SM Entertainment, the article said, which frequently includes Chinese members in its groups, and JYP, which has even launched full Chinese idol groups. So, HYBE's approach to China has been quite interesting. They have tried to expand its influence in China, but within the K-pop industry, even if the Hallyu ban remains closed, HYBE was the company least affected by that, right? But still, there are opportunities associated with the Chinese market if the Hallyu ban indeed lifts. Now, it might feel like, the Hallyu ban lifting all came out of nowhere, But if you look closer, the signs have been building for about 6 months now, since last year. Things have been progressing little by little in a very consistent direction. For example, back in November 2024, China started allowing visa-free entry for Korean tourists, first time ever. Later that month, the stay period was extended from 15 days to 30 days. Then came the Culture and Tourism Minister level meetings. China's Minister of Culture expressed strong interest in learning from Korea's content success, and proposals were made for deeper collaboration between the two countries, like museums, theaters, and cultural institutions. And Korea's Minister Yoo In-chon emphasized potential joint projects in games, film, and K-pop, suggesting they could even aim for global markets together. Then there was news in December how transit visas extended to 10 days for Koreans and 53 other countries. And then the culture minister continued to mention China. And then things got more serious. In February, National Assembly Speaker Woo Won-sik met directly with Xi Jinping. And then Xi Jinping mentioned a positive response to visiting Korea during APEC. He acknowledged the value of cultural exchange and said the two countries should avoid conflict in this area. And that meeting alone felt like a major shift. Xi Jinping speaking so openly about cultural ties was a green light for the K-pop industry. And then there was this exclusive article saying China is about to lift the 8-year Hallyu ban starting May. Since the ban itself was never officially written down in the first place, so it will be undone the same way, quietly, case by case. And then there were reports that TWICE had a fan meeting in Shanghai, and IVE also had an event in Shanghai, which is pretty significant. And then even a hip-hop group called Homies had a concert in China for the first time in 8 years as a Korean artist. And interestingly, a K-pop group called EPEX was supposed to have a concert in China, the first K-pop group to have concerts since 8 years ago, but then it got canceled last minute. According to the agency, it was due to local issues. So I think that speaks about the risks associated with the Chinese market, right? Things can get canceled or change last minute if the Chinese government decides to change their mind or something, or if there are any local issues happening out of nowhere. All right, now let's talk about the opportunities. As one of the articles has already mentioned, Chinese music market is pretty big. In 2023, the Chinese recorded music market generated $1.45 billion, which marked a 25.9% year-over-year growth, and is the fifth largest market globally. In terms of streaming revenue, the music streaming market in China was valued at $3.87 billion in 2024, and is projected to reach $8.39 billion by 2030, growing at CAGR of 13.6%. Now, I believe that when it comes to HYBE, for top tier groups like BTS, a reopened Chinese market doesn't suddenly change the game, because they already tour globally, and they are about to tour globally, and their albums already sell everywhere, and they don't need China to prove anything, so to say. But where it could matter is for newer artists, artists who are trying to level up. We're talking about groups like N-Team, ILLIT, or TOUS. And China could be a golden window for them. A market as huge as China, with fans that are hyper engaged and spend heavily, that could be a real boost. And for HYBE, it means more chances to build big fandoms in China. So while some benefits might take time to show up in the numbers, the potential upside here is pretty real, and especially for a company like HYBE, which already has global infrastructure in place. But there are risks, because Well, first of all, Chinese capital has already made significant inroads into South Korean's entertainment and gaming industry. So Tencent Music has acquired 9.38% of SM Entertainment, now making Tencent one of the largest shareholders of SM, following Kakao. And then SM Entertainment, interestingly, had already seen Chinese investment back in 2016 when Alibaba acquired a 4% stake. Tencent has also invested significantly in other major K-pop companies. How in 2016 it purchased a 4.3% stake in YG, and then another Tencent subsidiary holds 2.96% of Kakao Entertainment. Experts acknowledge that foreign investment can bring positive effects, but there are growing concerns about the downsides once Chinese capital secures a certain level of market control. And these concerns include like increased platform dependency or higher service fees and data monopolies, right? So this is something that Korea has to be careful about. But there are also other things. For example, Chinese netizens, Chinese fans, have previously reacted strongly to perceived slights by Korean artists. For example, back in 2020, BTS faced criticism in China over comments related to the Korean War. During an awards ceremony, BTS RM spoke about the shared history between South Korea and the US, which some Chinese netizens interpreted as disregarding China's role in the war. And this led to backlash on Chinese social media platforms, and some of BTS endorsements in China were temporarily affected, right? So I'm pretty sure many of you remember this case. BTS received the Van Fleet Award from Korea Society in 2020, which is a US-based nonprofit promoting Korea-US relations. And RM mentioned the shared sacrifices of Korea and the US during the Korean War, marking the 70th anniversary at the time. And the quote itself was straightforward and did not mention China at all. But Chinese media outlets, Global Times, Hwanggu and some Chinese netizens responded with outrage, claiming that RM's comments ignored China's role in the war. So from their perspectives, the Korean War, often referred in China under the slogan "Resist America, Aid Korea," is seen as a proud moment in Chinese history where China defended North Korea against U.S. aggression. So for many people in China, this war is framed as a U.S.-China confrontation, and they learned from an early age that China sacrificed over 200,000 troops to stop U.S. expansion. So, from their perspective, RM praising Korea-U.S. cooperation was interpreted by some as siding with the enemy. Now, the problem was, the backlash grew online in China, and major Korean brands like Samsung, Hyundai, which had BTS as spokesmodels, quickly removed BTS-related products and promotional content from their Chinese platforms. So this was viewed by many people as a preventive move to avoid further escalation, especially given lingering sensitivities from past issues like THAAD missiles deployments. But global media outlets like the New York Times, Reuters, and the Financial Times criticized the incident, describing it as an example of how foreign celebrities and brands must navigate the nationalist minefield in China. And that nationalist minefield in China is a significant risk factor, I believe, when it comes to the expansion into the Chinese market, right? And these media reports emphasize how even a neutral comment could trigger boycotts or political backlash in China's sensitive climate. But then, after the Chinese media and the Chinese netizens got globally criticized and criticized by armies around the world, the so-called controversy kind of died down, right? And according to this article, Chinese armies themselves criticized those people within China dissing BTS, right? Because this whole case, like misinterpreting and manipulating RM's remarks, is just too much. Now, I have personally felt this Chinese backlash pretty recently, 2 months ago. How at the time, Boy Next Door had a concert in Thailand, right? Was it Thailand? Bangkok, right? And then there was a Myanmar earthquake, so the concert got canceled a day before. And there were a lot of Chinese fans who came over to Thailand to watch Boy Next Door perform. But then after they heard the announcement that the concert got canceled, they posted messages online, basically criticizing Boy Next Door. They didn't even criticize KOZ Entertainment, their agency, but directly the group. And then there was this rumor saying a lot of Chinese fans got lost in Thailand, did not know what to do, and even some fans died, they said. And then they moved over to not only X, but also Weverse, writing hate comments, extreme hate comments, directed against Boy Next Door members. So at the time, I had to create content, videos, clarifying that it's such a baseless rumor. Chinese embassy themselves said that there were no reported Chinese deaths due to the earthquake. And then thankfully, Boy Next Door fans made their own moves and move over to Weverse to write support messages for the members. But because China has such a large population, there are a lot of fans who many of them, I believe, are nice and kind. But some people could be very hateful. And I'm pretty sure there are some Chinese people who pretend to be fans and diss the artists and the fandoms, right? So that's something that we or HYBE needs to be cautious about in the future if they indeed are serious about expand into the Chinese market, right? So we'll have to see. And also, when it comes to Chinese K-pop members, K-pop groups with Chinese members have sometimes faced complications due to geopolitical tensions. Like I said, Zui of Twice back in 2016, she's from Taiwan, right? And she was involved in a controversy after she was seen holding the Taiwanese flag on a Korean television show, right? And this led to significant backlash in China, and she had to issue a public apology, stating that there's only one China. And that incident had political ramifications as it coincided with Taiwan's presidential elections and was believed to have influenced voter sentiment even. So that's what happens if you as a company depend heavily on the Chinese market. If the market opens, then that's great. But once you depend on it in terms of your business, if you're faced with like backlash and potential boycotts, you have no option but to back down and apologize, even though the so-called incidents are sometimes, questionable. You know what I'm saying? And then there are also like intellectual property and business risk, because like sometimes foreign companies operating in China often encounter challenges related to intellectual property rights and business practices. And China operates on a first-to-file trademark system, meaning that the first person to register a trademark owns it, regardless of prior use elsewhere. So this has led to instances where foreign brands find their trademarks registered by local entities, which complicates their business operations. So, also, enforcement of intellectual property rights can be inconsistent, with Chinese local courts sometimes favoring domestic companies in disputes. And there are also concerns about content censorship, data security, and the protection of sensitive information like privacy. And these are the factors that HYBE must consider in its expansion strategy. Okay? So I think I covered all in terms of the risk. Last but not least, let's talk about the Korean government. So for some reason, I have seen even international viewers saying how once Lee Jae-myung becomes president, Korea will become like a satellite country under Chinese reign, because according to them, he's so pro-China. But as I have said in the beginning, Korea by nature has to be very cautious and sensitive and smart in terms of its diplomatic relations with other countries, because it is surrounded by some strong nations like Japan, China, Russia, North Korea, and the US as a strong ally. Now, so it's worth noting that even previous conservative administrations have also engaged closely with China. Okay? So, for example, Lee Myung-bak back in 2009 met with then Vice President Xi Jinping of China. So he held a meeting, had breakfast, and they discussed Korea-China relations, North Korea issue, and international affairs. And they agreed that the two countries had made steady progress in various areas since establishing a strategic cooperative partnership. Lee Jae-myung, the Korean president at the time, said, "China is not just an economic partner to us. It is a vital collaborator on global issues, including North Korea. I hope our two countries will continue to develop as close as partners, not just economically, but in areas like society, culture, education, and security." The next president, also from the Conservative Party, Park Geun-hye, participated in several significant official events in China that really highlighted the evolving relationship between Korea and China. So she attended whatchamacallit. So she paid a state visit to China in 2013 and then attended 2015 event, China's World War II commemoration, commemorating the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II. And she celebrated with China in China. And then she also attended 2015 China, Japan, South Korea trilateral summit. Now, back then, this is what the Chinese media called her. President Park is an old friend of the Chinese people and my old friend. That's what Xi Jinping, president, said. And the Washington Times said, China swoons for Park Geun-hye. The New York Times, actually, yeah, these are foreign media. The New York Times said, Korea-China Summit, a meeting between old friends. Beijing Youth Daily, President Park's visit to China demonstrates Pan-Asian influence. Kwanghwa Daily in China, the Korean president who understands China best. Hong Kong Culture Daily, President Park flaunts Hallyu through fashion. And there's this whole publication about her 2013 state visit to China. There are all these photos. And if you didn't know that she was from the Conservative Party, then you probably say that, oh, look at this. DP, Democratic Party president, being so friendly with the Chinese politicians or something. But again, regardless of your ideologies, China is an important country when it comes to its relation with Korea. Okay. What else? So I covered that. And then even the previous president, Yoon Suk-yeol, who has come up with this, and his party come up with this framework against the DP, saying that Lee Jae-myung is a very pro-China politician. He himself met with the chairman of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress of China, and they held an open discussion on ways to develop Korea-China relations. And President Yoon, president at the time, said that as the two countries marked the 30th anniversary of diplomatic ties, their relationship had grown remarkably in quantitative terms. And he expressed hope that over the next 30 years, relations would also deepen qualitatively based on mutual respect. So yeah, even President Yoon regarded China as an important country. Now, the so-called pro-China Lee Jae-myung, this is what he has said before. So during an interview, when was this? In 2022, at the Democratic Party headquarters, presidential candidate at the time, Lee Jae-myung, expressed a firm stance on foreign policy issues with China. He said, "We must speak up when necessary. We will strictly crack down on illegal activities by North Korean or Chinese fishing boats in our waters. If they violate our maritime territory, they should be sunk. Would we have shown leniency if it were Somali boats? We will respond clearly and fairly." And when he was asked about China's controversial efforts to claim Korean culture during the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics, he said, "A competent leader must point out problems without worsening the situation. The key is ensuring minimal harm to Korea and encouraging China to exercise self-restraint." Okay, so that's his view, and I personally believe that is a, how do you say that? Pragmatist? Like, regardless of the ideologies, he has said that he will try to position Korea in a very diplomatic way when it comes to its relations with other countries. So labeling him as a pro-China politician or president, I don't know. I feel like that's too much at this point. We'll have to see. But I see even, international subscribers and viewers saying how, Lee Jae-myung will hand over Korea to the Chinese government. But I think that's just not right. I'll say that. All right. And speaking of which, there was also this saying how once Lee Jae-myung becomes president, HYBE is ruined as a company. But guess what? Right after the election today, HYBE was the only K-pop company whose stock rose by 3.3%, and including the after-hours result by more than 4%, while SM, JYP fell, and YG did not move at all. And Kakao, on the other hand, fell by 3.6%. So, where are all the haters who made such remarks that HYBE is ruined? I don't know, man. I don't know. The stock might fall. Maybe this is just a dead cat bounce after, the so-called dramatic plunge that it experienced last week. But I see no problem. I see no issue. So we'll have to see. All right, what else? I think I covered it all. Let me finish with this article. If the long shut doors to the Chinese market finally reopen in earnest, the K-pop industry could be presented with a massive growth opportunity, the article said, something that would have been hard to imagine in the past. After 9 years of restrictions, the pent-up demand among Chinese fans for K-pop may very well explode into a wave of concert attendance. The advertising and sponsorship markets are also expected to revive. Just as Hallyu stars once had massive commercial impact as brand ambassadors across various Chinese industries, K-pop idol groups may once again rise to become some of the most sought-after advertising models, especially among younger consumers in China. That said, the reopening of the Chinese market shouldn't be welcomed uncritically. One industry expert warned, rather than dreaming of reliving the glory days, we need to take a clear-eyed look at how the Chinese market has changed and build a new strategy accordingly. We need to closely track local fans' shifting tastes and preferences and offer high-quality, differentiated content grounded in a deep understanding of Chinese culture. Strengthening strategic partnerships with local entertainment companies and pursuing an aggressive localization strategy will also be key to establishing a solid footing in China. The reopening of the Chinese market is undeniably a golden opportunity for K-pop, but it's also a critical turning point that demands new approaches. Rather than treating it as a one-off return to concert tours, the focus should be on building a long-term, sustainable relationship based on mutual respect and cultural understanding between K-pop and Chinese audiences. A concert industry official familiar with the Chinese market said, "It's true that some regional governments in China have shown interest in hosting K-pop concerts, but I don't think we'll see large-scale shows anytime soon. Cultural exchange between Korea and China was on hold for so long, and the market still carries a lot of volatility. That's why most Korean entertainment companies are likely to take a wait-and-see approach through the second half of this year before rolling out concert plans." The real issue is how activities resume. Companies should not rush into large-scale projects just for revenue. The priority should be establishing a stable strategy that takes volatility into account and prepares for a potential risk. So I think that last segment is worth reading one more time. The real issue is how activities resume. Companies should not rush into large-scale projects just for revenue. The priority should be establishing a stable strategy that takes volatility into account and prepares for a potential risk. Okay, so I think that same message applies to HYBE as well, and I hope and I believe that they have some sort of strategy and plan prepared. And also, they're thinking about potential risks that come with the expansion in the Chinese market. Those risks that I have already mentioned, potential scandals, controversies, even if those scandals and controversies could be just made up within the Chinese netizens. They need to think about how to approach and how to respond if issues arise. And also how we as fans can respond if, something happens to our beloved artist. After entering the Chinese market. If they get hated unnecessarily by netizens based on groundless rumors, what can we do? I will make content, videos, as I've always done, fact-based to clarify things. But yeah, I think we need to be prepared. And once again, have I told you that I majored in East Asian studies at when I studied in the U.S. And if there's one thing that I've learned, that is that, Korea, they need to be hypersensitive and hyper intelligent and quick-minded when it comes to diplomacy. It's a very tricky, geopolitical situation that Korea is in, especially in today's world. So we'll have to see how the new government and HYBE navigate. All right, peace and love. Bye-bye.